Welcome back. On Monday, we brought you part one of our interview with former New York gubernatorial hopeful Zaphyr Teachout. Now, the Fordham law professor, she has a new book out. It's titled Corruption in America, From Benjamin Franklin's Snuff Box to Citizens United. And I should tell you, the book sales, they're actually doing better than the person who beat her for the job she wanted. That, of course, Governor Cuomo. And we spoke with Zephyr about both her book and its focus on corruption. Give people the anecdote that you cover in the book about Benjamin Franklin and about a gift that he received and how it was viewed then versus how maybe we look at it now.
Yeah, the book's title is Corruption in America, From Benjamin Franklin's Snuff Box to Citizens United. And the snuff box is this jeweled portrait of the King of France on a little snuff box that was given by the King of France to Benjamin Franklin when he was ending his diplomatic tour. And people were very concerned about this because they thought it would corrupt Franklin. And in fact, they were so concerned that there's a provision in our Constitution that forbids accepting a gift of any kind whatever. That's the language. It's like really petulant language from a foreign power. And the concern there wasn't that there was an explicit quid pro quo deal. It's that these kinds of gifts, they affect you emotionally. They make you sort of think of the King of France more favorably, so that when there's a treaty, you might look on French economic interests more favorably. And we were going against all of Europe at this point. You know, the point of the story, and actually a lot of the book, is to say we were founded fighting money in politics. It's who we are as Americans.
There is this imagery for people who say, oh, Tammany Hall, that's as bad as it ever got.
Right.
Again, as a student of history, put in context those days, which, by the way, the imagery, that's where Governor Cuomo, when he first got elected in his first term, he went there to drain the swamp of Albany. Talk about the Tammany Hall of then and actually now, and in how many ways it's just a lot more professionalized now than it used to be, right?
Yeah, so a friend and colleague and I joke sometimes, and it is a joke, we want sort of more bribery, less corruption, which is to say that the real threat to our democracy right now isn't actually in the folks that you see going away in handcuffs. They shouldn't be doing it. You should not sell your vote. It's a bad idea. It's bad for democracy. But the real threat is legalized bribery, is Extel Corporation giving $100,000 to Andrew Cuomo and then getting $30 million in subsidies and tax breaks to build luxury housing in Manhattan when we have a real need for low-income housing. That, you know, not against the law to give a $100,000 contribution, but deeply corrupting. And it's just common sense.
You cover quite a bit in the book about Citizens United, and you, in fact, you gave certain of the opinion that was given by Justice Kennedy at the time. Let me give him the benefit of the doubt that he didn't believe that the consequences of that ruling would be what they've been now. Where did the court get it wrong? And if you could put in practical terms for our audience, how, in effect, that ruling has opened the floodgates and how they can change elections, not just for a presidential race, but even for a dog catcher race in town.
Yeah. So what Citizens United did technically was strike down a law that limited corporate spending that's uncoordinated with campaigns. But it did something far bigger, and I'll return to the generosity question. I think it actually had this effect on very wealthy people in this country that wasn't a legal effect. It sort of gave permission. It said, you know, you aren't, if you're trying to figure out a way to spend money on elections, big money on elections to influence policy for corporate ends, there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the American tradition. And Justice Kennedy talks about, you know, influencing politicians is part of what it is to be a democracy, and donors can influence.
That the economy needed a voice.
Yes, right, the big business needs a voice.
Never knew they didn't have a voice before. They had a voice at all, but
So I think Justice Kennedy sees himself, I actually think it's a tragedy in a real sense. You know, when a tragedy is when something that is best about you becomes that which destroys you. And one of the most extraordinary parts of the American constitutional tradition is the First Amendment. This real, deep cultural embrace of true dissent and freedom of expression. Justice Kennedy takes that First Amendment and uses it to strike down limits on corporate spending. And I think he's just sort of not living in a real world and not seeing that there are other values like corruption, money, and politics at play.
You definitely have politics. Have you been infected by it now? Are you going to run again for sure?
I would love to. Yeah. No, you know, it's so funny because I write about corruption. I talk about corruption. I talk about all the terrible parts of raising money. But the real dirty secret is that politics is more fun than anything in the world.
Yeah, you know what? You're absolutely right. Well, it's a fascinating read here, and certainly one that's doing very well. And I could tell you, it's doing better than a certain governor's book at the moment. Again, Corruption in America. Zephyr Teachout, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Yes. And coming up next around, we're going to have a look at news making headlines in the Hudson Valley. Please stay with us.